Everybody can speak. Anything that holds you back is your thought process, your mindset. My focus is not to create actors and entertainers. My focus has always been to give voice to experts. They already carry that expertise. It's just a matter of expressing it. To get a high-flying consultant in, then expect them to come and fix my problems. It's not going to happen. The solution that you would come up with will stick to you much, much better than something that you saw. There's an imagery. It says there are 4 billion people in just India and China and parts of Asia. And then there are 4 billion people elsewhere, everywhere else. That's a very, very strong statement. When I look at China and I'm like, they don't use English. They don't even use Google, for example. I think it's time that CEOs start talking.
Can you tell me what you do at the moment? I see the SpeakIn mug. So you have other brands. When you meet someone for the first time, what do you speak about?
I only speak about SpeakIn because that's my only identity. I would start by saying that no entrepreneur should do that. I started about 9 years ago, in fact, a little more because the ideation took a few years, but it's been a deeply passionate journey. So I only speak about SpeakIn. And I'm glad now that I'm not alone. There are thousands of people all over the world who are also SpeakIn. So yeah, I think we're in a good place.
Okay. And SpeakIn, I imagine you started with the speakers. That's why you chose SpeakIn. Tell me about the brand. Why choosing SpeakIn and why the little French at the accent circonflexe? It's not an accent that is used in many languages, I think.
Yeah, I think I come from a consulting background, so I was always pretty intrigued and emphasized on doing a little more or going a little more intentional on everything, just to provide a little more flavor. That's where you see the accent. But SpeakIn started as it's still a network of experts, but our first and primary offering was on providing speakers for different events and conferences, which happen in India and elsewhere. Now, as we stand today, we own 30 speaker bureaus world over, including India Speakers Bureau, Singapore Speakers Bureau, Japan, Malaysia, and more. The second line of business that we have is an extension of that. So while the Speaker Bureau business is more about giving a larger group level learning and providing group level access to these experts and thought leaders across different genres, the Find a Coach platform, which has just come about, is an extension of that, but it is a more customized one-on-one interaction, one-on-one learning, and about one-on-one access to these experts.
Okay. And then you have Asia Dialogues within the ecosystem you've created.
Asia Dialogues is also, so the entire ecosystem of SpeakIn is very closely knit. Given that we have experts and thought leaders across spread over different, both from a topical perspective as well as from a geographical perspective, we thought that it was very important to create a community of sorts, a community which will enable us to interact with these people outside of the usual transactions that we do, right? I mean, from either on the Speaker Bureau side or on the coaching side, which is where Asia Dialogues Forum was born. We also believe that in the past 18 months of journey of Asia Dialogues and as many events that we have done in person across 6 countries now, it has become a place where thought leaders create deeper conversations and are able to ideate and find their own clan. And that has given us a massive push forward. In fact, I thought the Asia Dialogues Forum will kind of something that we would create and benchmark on World Economic Forum for the West, which I still believe is West heavy. We wanted to create parallel conversations in the East. I'm really intrigued by the recent, there's an imagery that's floating on the internet, the black and red imagery where it says there are 4 billion people in just India and parts of Asia, of course, India, China, and parts of Asia. And then there are 4 billion people elsewhere, everywhere else. That's a very, very strong statement to look at. For us, I think the first and foremost, when we started, we thought it'll just be Singapore, which is where I'm based. But then the response was such, the feedback was such, the interaction quality was such that we were forced to take it to India, then to Japan, then to Malaysia, then to Indonesia, and in many such countries. This year itself, we are headed to China and then to Riyadh.
Okay. So is it every year you do all the countries or you do a few countries every year?
So India, Singapore, and Japan are hard-coded on the calendar because these are big markets for us. But everywhere else is dependent on the traction and second on the current as well as potential traction.
Got it. And what led you to do what you do? Because you have a career that started in engineering, if I'm not mistaken, and then your career also went through other things, like management consulting, but you were also doing sales at some point.
Yeah.
And you ended up with SpeakIn. What's the driving force that has been there all along, and why those choices?
I think engineering is not really was never really a big question mark, because as far as India is concerned, you throw a stone, 3 out of 4 chances are that it'll hit an engineer. So that's where I come from. I think the journey has been phenomenal. I think it is the journey to SpeakIn, I think, was started just when I was born itself. I was born into a middle-class family. I was an only child of my parents, a girl child at that, which was a thing. And in a typical middle-class setup, and both my parents were government servants. So today times are very different, but when I look back those many decades that I've lived on earth, it was a very linear journey, right? You grow up, you would get a job. That's about it. You'd come home and then you would live your life. The difference between the haves and have-nots over a period of time, I realized, is not just a financial value difference. It's the difference is actually of access. And which started creating a bit of a dissatisfaction or a bit of an inquisitiveness in me. I thought that I'm not going to be challenged by who I know and just what I know. And there was always a bit of resentment towards hierarchy. I always made better friends with my teachers than my classmates. I made better friends with my bosses than my peers. And that kind of manifested years later into creating SpeakIn, where I thought that why should an average person who has the will and the skill and the aspiration, why should he or she be devoid of an opportunity just because he or she doesn't know or doesn't have access to what it could have been? Like they say, a king's son automatically becomes a king. I think that needs to change. World needs more meritocracy. Unfortunately, we are still seeing colors of it. Some part of it will always exist, but with the world shaping, a world changing, more access, more people observing, getting exposed to newer opportunities, I think we probably be looking at a much flatter world. And I'm glad that SpeakIn has played that role in somebody that you admire, somebody that you are in awe of. You're able to see that person up front. You're able to touch and feel the person, hear from the person.
It's interesting. You're talking about more the attendees. I thought you would be talking about the speakers. Because when you create the marketplace, it's both sides. So everything you were saying, I was more thinking about the difficulty to be a public speaker at the beginning, because you don't think you have the legitimacy or you don't know how to start. And I think the TEDx that you published is about this, because I saw the TEDx. I was thinking about this when you were talking, but there's also the attendee side, of being in close proximity with someone inspiring.
Honestly speaking, I think, and again, I would go back to my roots, right? In India, speaking is not really a big differentiator, especially in northern part of India where I come from. Everybody speaks and everybody thinks they can speak. They're natural speakers. And we talk. We are pretty animated in our communication and we like saying things at times without processing it. I think it's just an assumption that everybody can speak. So anything that holds you back is your thought process, your mindset. You're the only person holding you back. Even those who can't speak anatomically can speak, can express themselves. So I don't think that's something that we really added value. But yes, from a speaking circuit perspective, I think I do take the credit that as far as the Indian market is concerned, we made public speaking a thing. And public speaking for value, definitely a thing. Erstwhile India, if I look at any time till about 2010 or so, India was only prepared to pay for sports stars, particularly cricketers and Bollywood speakers. Those were the only 2 kinds of people who were actually getting money to be paid. Everything else was seen as, we're doing you a favor. We are calling you. This is a mark of pride, which still is. But we changed that. We changed that narrative. We changed the narrative to prize the value that each of these thought leaders bring. And our focus, and I have said that repeatedly, and I'm going to still say, my focus is not to create fancy speakers. My focus is not to create actors and entertainers. My focus has always been to give voice to experts. They already carry that expertise. It's just a matter of expressing it. I think the world has changed in that sense that today having an accent is not considered as bad.
If you have a British accent, you always sound more interesting for some reason. I think it still happens.
Which is absolutely fine. There's still value on native English speakers, for example. But it is not considered wrong or it is not considered bad. And which is the world that I want to get to. That
me too.
Your language. Second is that English is not the only language of expression. And I'm very happy that I sit in Singapore and I see, particularly when I look at China, and China is a market of huge interest for us. When I look at China and I'm like, they don't use English. They don't even use Google, for example. The typical English products that perhaps the world uses, they're doing phenomenally well. And they take pride in what they are, their language and their roots. And I think that is where the world should be. Yes, the language has been a great unifier, no doubt about it. Life is much easier when two people speak the same language and understand it alike. But I'm a fan of expression and being able to be interpreted in the way that you meant, instead of being very soft and...
Yeah. For China, your conference is going to be in Chinese, or it's also going to be in English?
It'll be a mix. I don't speak Chinese. It'll be definitely led by our experts who do speak Chinese, who are Chinese experts.
Super. Just to recap, we were talking about the SpeakIn. I understood the ecosystem. You spoke about your childhood and the fact that SpeakIn was contained already at that point. And then you spoke about access, about the importance for people to be in touch with basically greatness, I imagine, as attendees. I always look at things from the HR perspective because that's who I'm interacting with the most. What advice do you give to organizations on bringing experts, bring them as coach speakers, attending events? How do you advise people to have this kind of interface with experts that are not inside the organization?
I think in today's transitions, at the pace at which transitions are happening, the external experts are becoming mandatory, kind of becoming imperative to the growth of an organization, because you can't really be expected to upskill and bring in a newer talent on the go and full-time talent on some of these things, because some of these things could just be trending. But you can't not know about it, but you also don't know if it's too early to invest wholeheartedly into some of these things. And that is where experts come into picture. The first and foremost, from a group learning perspective, from the group upskilling perspective, I think experts are very helpful, particularly in functional and technical areas. The areas which are not specific to individual, instead they want to align the entire organization towards a particular, whether it's a technology, whether it is a functional change, whether it is an emerging trend, whether it relates to geopolitical issues and more. The second area where organizations bring in group learning, and particularly experts, is to bring everybody together on the same page with respect to mindset shifts, change management, entrepreneurial ability, and the overall vision of the organization. Because, some of these things are better said and better spoken by somebody external instead of somebody internal. Especially for legacy organizations, if you have a CEO of 20 years sitting there and saying, hey, we all got to change now. Everybody's like, yeah, sure. Let's change you. Let's start with you. However, when you have somebody externally coming in, a third party coming in and talking about it, it's a different kind of a messaging, right? It is also treated as something afresh and outside in view. The third use case, it's never spoken of. It's more of a unspoken use case, which is when organization wants to give a message, but can't do it by themselves. And it is used, say, in cases where you want to pull the organization up. Productivity, motivation are big areas where organizations tend to use external speakers, wellness to be brought in and to give messages which are larger and a little more generic. But these messages tend to go through better when said and when brought in from an external perspective. So these are the three kinds of interventions that organizations usually use to bring in these experts. I typically request organizations, and which is where our role in terms of solutionizing, we are not mere connectors. We actually help our clients think through their problem statements and find them the right people who will be able to solve that problem for them with this external messaging. A typical organization would walk in and, have a problem statement with respect to, it could be technical, it could be functional, it could be behavioral. We would structure that into topics, we would structure that into themes, and then we will find the right people who can bring that messaging in.
I was going to ask you, how do you maximize the value of a speaker? Because if they come too quickly and then it's just a talk, I guess you're talking about the preparation, so that's really interesting. How do you make sure that people are ready and they speak about the right thing in the right context connected to the organization? And then the other part is more, how do you make sure that people follow through with action and it's just not a talk and then nothing happens? So you talked about the first one. Anything you want to add on the first one prior to the intervention and then after?
I think, like I said, the solutionizing becomes very important, and definition of the problem statement also becomes very critical. A lot of times this exercise is done in multiple steps. First is to establish a more generic and a higher level understanding of and structuring of the problem statement itself. You may see some things happening, CEO, for example, or business heads. You may see some trends emerging. It could be low sales. It could be low morale. It could be high attrition. It could be much less cross-functional alignment. It could be much lower customer satisfaction, dropping CSAT scores, etc., etc., etc. Those are just indicators of a larger underlying problem. In a lot of cases, especially in, I would say, medium-scale enterprises, the problem statements are a lot more complicated and they're not linear. A smaller organization, however, could be very, very linear, right? I mean, you're not getting enough sales. Okay, let's look at the sales department. And similarly, in a large cap organization, it could be even more complicated. It could then be functional. It could then be product led. It could then be geographical, etc., etc. So I think the first interventions usually for organizations, which is where we are able to bring in management or leaders and thought leaders, these are people who could come in from an external perspective and look at the problem statement from 100,000 feet view, which helps in further crystallizing where the problems, or maybe pointing out to where the problems actually lie. Most of these sessions end up giving a lot of thought process. See, when you're sitting in the organization, and I think which is where also you're seeing the fall of consulting, right? And all the bigger consulting companies all over the world are suffering right now. They're feeling the heat. I won't say suffering, but they're definitely feeling the heat. And they're feeling the heat because it's not a vanity metric anymore to get a consultant, a high-flying consultant in, and then expect them to come and fix my problems. It's not going to happen. The solutions are most sustainable when it comes from within, when it comes with the acceptance that this is a solution that we came up with, we implemented it, and we're going to stand by it.
IKEA effect.
I think in that sense, the experts and these speaker sessions add far more value than to bring somebody in for a longer period of time and look through the processes. You're hiring intelligent people. Most of these organizations spend so much time in hiring the right people for their different departments and different functions and different things to do. I mean, subjecting them to suddenly an external intervention most of the times is a counterproductive exercise. Repeatedly guiding them, you're not doing this right, and now you have to do it this way, or da 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 da. An external speaker, on the other hand, comes in very handy. The job of an external speaker is to come in, share his or her story, and then to help you think. That's their job. And then they leave. Then they're hands off.
How long does it last, more or less? And usually an intervention?
Most of the sessions are for 60 to 90 minutes. And we usually follow a 30-30-30 rule. 30 is the classroom kind of a session. 30 is a case study, and 30 is interaction. The goal of every such session is to make people think. Think from an organizational standpoint, think from a personal standpoint, think from a team standpoint. And then if they need, of course, we bring in, therefore, the coaching practice, which is where we bring in specific interventions when the problem statement has been defined. And which is where we bring in either a smaller group level intervention, workshops, or one-on-one interaction with highly customized and targeted problem statements being managed. That flow works so much better. And of course, it's cheaper, it's quicker. As far as speaker sessions are concerned, we've scheduled speaker sessions in less than 48 hours. As far as our coaching platform is concerned, it's ready to use. You can implement a customized coaching platform in less than 7 days. So yeah.
And I was wondering, at the beginning, you spoke about speakers and coach, and to me, there are very different types of practitioners, let's call them. The speaker, for me, is someone who's going to do knowledge transfer and give some content, whereas the coach, in my mind, is always someone who's the best. Like, if you look at it from a purist standpoint, is someone who doesn't do any knowledge transfer and just ask questions and let people find their own answers. And it usually takes a lot of time. The coach that you describe is half in between, right? It's more like a mentor coach, or is it a pure coach?
That's where I think I would maybe take a pause and share a little more about the Find a Coach platform. Our focus is not just to stick to certified coaching mechanisms where it's just a function of asking specific questions to move. So while there is merit in enabling people to think through for their own problem statements, and a lot of these answers, like I said, that, I think any person who has recognized that there is a problem has the basic understanding and basic IQ and EQ to find a solution also, or at least a way to find solutions. I mean, for example, a motivational speaker would come and say, hey, keep your spirits high. Who doesn't know keep your spirits high? Of course, we all know that we should keep our spirits high, and so on and so forth. It's just about knowing the context, and which is where we focus on bringing in people, when I say people, coaches, who have industry expertise, who come from similar sectors, who have had business interventions in their past lives, and preferably similar sectors, at least geography and more. And that helps in making sure that the conversations that our coachees are having a lot more relatable. They're not just Q&A session, they're also value-added conversations. So yes, it is a function of both. It's a quasi-mentoring and quasi-coaching.
Got it. And so for organization working with you, you usually are taking care of the problem statement. It's not the speakers. So it's the team at SpeakIn who does that.
Correct.
The problem statement definition.
Absolutely.
Okay. Very interesting. Very interesting. And the coaching, basically you plant the seed or you trigger the change through the speaker. And then the coaching, how long does it usually last?
So coaching sessions, it's a subscription-based platform where coaching lasts anywhere from 6 to 4 hours over a period of 3 to 12 months. We encourage, particularly for technical expertise and for middle-level executives, we recommend that specific outputs being done on a quarterly basis so that they're able to get value and a quicker value out of it. And then for the larger or the CEO level people, we recommend that the coaching be extended over a period of time, because then that becomes more of a support system. But then as far as our platform is concerned, the platform itself is capable of being available 24/7. So you're not really relying on physical scheduling or a third-party scheduling to help get through to the coach. You can do it live.
Okay. And when you talk about outcomes, like what kind of outcome would qualify as an outcome?
I think the three kinds of things that we look at. Number one is the internal performance, of course, of the employee, which comes from both the sponsoring team as well as the leadership. The second big part which we look at is the SpeakIn Quality Index, and which is led by the Leadership Quotient, which is an assessment that we conduct at the beginning of the session as well as at the end of the coaching exercise that helps us in understanding the delta and the change that has happened in the person's coaching experience. This is for behavioral areas. For less technical areas, it is seen over a period of 12 months because behavioral changes are gradual and slow to come back. For technical areas, for example, communication, delegation, and some of those areas, we look at more of a short-term 3 to 6 month kind of a window.
Okay. And on the other side, if I'm an HR director or let's say I'm the compensation head in an MNC and I want to participate and be a speaker or a coach, what is it like for me to get involved with SpeakIn or the Speakers Bureau or the Find a Coach platform?
It's a very straightforward process. You can register on the platform, fill in your details. There are about 48 different variables that we ask for. And after you've made the first joining form complete, it goes into a curation process, which takes 90 days. And so we have that shorter, but we had to increase it because of the volume of applications that we are receiving on a daily basis now.
Congratulations.
We still are a small team, but it's an automated process. 90% of it is automated, wherein the SpeakIn Quality Index that I talked about, it creates a score for every single person on a scale of 10. Anything 7 and below is automatically rejected by the system, and then there's an adequate email that goes back. But anything 8, 9, and 10 focuses further into a manual evaluation. And then if all is good, then it is approved.
Okay. If you see change where you were talking about mindset, let's imagine that the company is going through a plateau and it's been many years of plateau and now they think they have the need to transform. You put a seed, let's say, in the leadership team. Would you be coaching everyone in parallel? And how do you connect the different people? Like, how does it work when the change needs to be across different departments and across multiple individuals?
The first step is to lay down the larger issue, right? I mean, the larger change required. Once that is done, we get a buy-in from the leaders. And once the leader buy-in comes in, that is then deployed across different departments which are impacted, which are a part of the solution. And each individual goes through the leadership quotient assessment, which is itself basis for us to understand the current level of leadership behavior. And once that level is established, we then create a curated journey for each of these leaders, which is then put into action, like I said, over the period of 12 months. Each coaching intervention is also supported by self-paced learning, which is also part of the platform. So it's all automated, very little manual intervention. And of course, I'm a fan of keeping people engaged rather than having an absolute technology takeover. So we have a dedicated project manager who works on the project for the client to make sure each engagement is yielding. We also, just to add to your point, Matty, on the ROI that you talked about, a big part of ROI for us and a big monitoring factor for us is adoption. How many people are coming back to book the second session, and then the third and the fourth and the fifth and the sixth? So that is very, very, very tightly monitored. And we don't leave it to the clients. Just because we've been paid and now everything is sorted, we've deployed it, now it's your problem. That's not how we work. Because that's the biggest feedback to any program. Are people coming back to use it? So we focus on that very heavily. For us, I'm very happy to say that across all the projects which have been renewed, we've had 100% adoption, which is unheard of. And you can never get that kind of an ROI in any group learning intervention or any mass, purely digital intervention.
Okay. And the budget comes from HR? It comes from training or learning budgets? Or does it work usually?
Yes, correct.
So in Malaysia, would you be HRDC claimable or not yet?
No, because our price points don't align.
Okay.
So our price points usually are much higher than the
HRDC
pricing.
Okay. Do you manage to connect the older community, the elders in the region to the companies, or younger folks? It's always the same. I feel like you have the experts on topics, as you said, and then you have people who bring new ideas more from a creativity standpoint. Do you do that as well through the Speakers Bureau and the coaching, like bringing people who have completely different mindsets than the organization they would operate with, or that's not something you do yet?
Absolutely. We do like to bring eclectic views into the organization, but ultimately it depends on the fabric of the organization, their ability to absorb their current culture, and what is it that they're internally looking for. I think a lot of our recommendations are aplenty. Our options that we put on the table are aplenty, which is a value that we bring onto the table. And the final decisions and the marriage to the larger vision is, of course, the organizations.
Where do you see the company going? SpeakIn in 10 years, you have Speakers Bureau everywhere, you have dialogues everywhere. Why do I see? Maybe for the tech, where do you see the platform go?
Our technology is very strong. I think from a tech perspective, we built a product which meets the needs as on date. There is a lot of buzz and conversation about bringing in AI into the product. But I think for us, the value add of SpeakIn will always be that you're able to connect to people. It'll always be a people-first company. Our focus is to make it very, very easy, accessible. We want to come down as far as the price points are concerned to be able to cater to a slightly larger audience. Currently, our focus is on middle management and above. That, I think, would definitely be something that'll change in the coming, I would say, quarters, not years. In fact, we just started doing some work for the People's Association in Singapore, which is a government body on community engagement. We had our first big initiative for children aged 7 to 14, and this was on communication. We are doing a similar workshop for children from 14 to 17 years old next month again in Singapore. And in India, we have just in the process of partnering with the government of Delhi for providing similar set of topics and learnings to school students. That part is also opening up. I think now that we've figured out and we've kind of stabilized the professional learning part of what SpeakIn does, I think it is time to bring that impact to our younger folks. Children today are much smarter, much more exposed than what I was, for example.
Same.
And also, I think there's a lot of confusion when it comes to children, particularly teenage and above, in terms of the choices of career, in terms of the larger definition of career pathing and more, because the options are so many, right? When I graduated, it was just a doctor, engineer, and then don't know what else. But today, life is very different. So I think our experts will play that role to decode the world for our youngsters. And that is a role that we want to play more and more.
So it's career development, so telling them what they can do, like showing them the possibilities, helping them choose. And it's also communication, you said.
It's a combination of all of those to make them ready for the world.
Okay, makes sense. Is it a way to scale the speakers that would come in the company? So it's cheaper, basically. You attend a dialogue and you get a dose of all the big trends that are happening. Is that the vision behind it? You spoke about getting clans together, so community building. Can you tell us more about what the dialogues are?
It's a combination of thought leaders. That's what it is. I mean, some of them are current or potential clients or speakers, but the primary goal of building Asia Dialogues Forum is to bring together discussions and discovery. And a massive focus is definitely on creating a network and community of individuals who can then connect with each other and interact with each other.
Got it. You spoke about the 30, 60 to 90 minutes, and you do classroom, case study, interactivity. One of the things I feel doesn't happen enough in events, and I don't know about dialogues, I didn't join yet. It's the fact that it's more lectures and you get bombarded with content. And you end the day with like 6 or 7 cool ideas that you got, maybe sometimes in depth, sometimes they're actionable, but not so much time for what you described of connecting or thinking about your own self, your team, your organization. It's usually like you get bombarded, you can't think too much. So you plan that in the future, you'll be thinking about these things. And then time passes, you probably took the day to attend the events. So the next day you have more work, and then the rat race continues and you don't get the time to do these things. I have this kind of frustration of the fact that you don't have enough time for deeper thinking. Usually you don't get to act either. And then how do you do that? Did you avoid those pitfalls? And then the other bit is, I don't remember who I heard it from, but basically you can get a TED talk online and get the best speaker on the topic of whatever. Why go to regional events and not just go on the computer and download videos for free on YouTube or wherever? So those are the two things when I think about events. And I also want to organize events for Brio. I'm not crossing the idea at all, but I always have those frustrations. I think the networking part is really important. You took to it. So that I see as a benefit versus being on your computer. But for the other parts, because you do also those 30, so you already have those understandings. How do you put them into a bigger scale thing where it's harder to do?
I think that's a very valid question and pretty interesting also. There is already ample content out there. I don't think world needs more content that's already been produced. And particularly for the leaders that we bring in together, they need more discussions. They need more brainstorming. There are enough textbooks already created. There are enough blogs, videos, YouTube, Insta, LinkedIn, and so on and so forth already created. I think it's time that people spoke about it, saw similar challenges in each other, discussed it out, spoke about it, brainstormed, and then got to a conclusion. See, it's the same thing, right? A conclusion that you would come up with or a solution that you would come up with will stick to you much, much better than something that you saw. You have to look at each of these learnings in the context of your realities. And that's what a discussion helps us to do. We have, and we continue to work with large-scale events. We have an annual event that we do in Singapore, which focuses on the HR leaders. But
when is it, by the way? Sorry, Deepshikha.
This is, last year it was August. This year it will be September. And the idea is with the Asia Dialogues Forum, the idea is to bring together leaders so that they can talk amongst themselves. They can talk, they can share, they can learn, they can unlearn. And that is why I think Asia Dialogues Forum has been so successful. That's the only reason, because it's not that you're coming in and sitting on one of the classroom chairs and then hearing somebody else talk. I think it's time that CEOs start talking. Also, I think that thought leaders need more opportunities. These are some of the most phenomenal people that are curated and handpicked by the SpeakIn team. And hats off to the team that kind of creates every single event of this roundtable of this nature. These are academicians, these are politicians, these are bureaucrats, these are CEOs, these are entrepreneurs. And that room for those 2 hours, at times it's overwhelming. The amount of learnings that you hear, their own experiences, and then you're able to process it and engage your own circumstances, your own context. And you're like, oh yeah, I'm also feeling that. This is what I did. It's just amazing. Each of the sessions that we've done, every session has been better than the previous one. Yeah.
Got it. So it's basically you treat them as peers. Everyone has the sticking button goes through the room. It's also curated for the attendees then. Everyone is curated?
Everybody's curated. We have about 25 people around the table. Every single person is curated.
Okay. That's the reason why you were talking about earlier, the fact that you are not HRDC claimable because of the price point. That forces exclusivity when you have to curate. Like, it's one thing to have one speaker and then 5,000 people listening to him or her. And then those setups where you have way fewer people. And then the same thing happens for the smaller groups, getting a very important person or someone very knowledgeable on the topic inside an organization. For 15, it's also the same. How do you think about scale for not only the young generation, but also the other executives? How can you scale the SpeakIn peer, those experiences through more people without losing the interactivity and thinking about your own reality?
I think one big part of our scale is our channel partner program, which is where we are recognizing, identifying, and engaging and empaneling channel partners across different countries who would then be replicating the SpeakIn playbook, which includes the roundtables, which includes the other sources of engagement to create a community. So the idea is to create a community of thought leaders across the world, one country at a time, bit by bit by bit. It's intense. It is a lot more expensive than creating digital communities and WhatsApp groups, but it's a lot more tighter. And the quality of people are a class apart.
Got it. When is the next event in Malaysia, if any?
Malaysia for 2026 is not on the cards, but I'm sorry, 2025 is not on the cards.
But 2026.
Yes, 2026.
Okay,
yeah.
cool. Anything I didn't talk about or I didn't ask that you think we should know about SpeakIn and you?
SpeakIn is a phenomenon, and I also believe that being really blessed. God has been very kind, that our work has been recognized. People walk up to us and try and associate with us. Our quality, our focus on premiumness has paid well. What we want to do more and more is to engage more and more people to come in and be a part of the community. I would love for people to come forward and think for themselves and how can Speak add value to them individually, professionally, and more, and how could they add value to SpeakIn. I'm an absolute believer in community building. And yeah, we're always looking for partners of all kinds. Any thoughts? I'm always available. I'm always yours.
Sounds good, Deepshikha. Thank you so much. Thank you for the time.